Hey everybody, Joel Wanasek here with Unstoppable Recording Machine, and today we're going to take a look at balancing rhythm guitars and bass in heavy metal music and talk about some of the pros and cons of balancing. Now, balance is obviously something that's highly subjective and is going to be individual for each person mixing. However, the important thing to think about is a couple of things. First off, you want to realize that there are trade-offs. So for example, if you make your balance in your guitar super loud, you're gonna lose some of the impact and excitement and energy in the track. If you turn your bass up super loud, you're gonna kill a lot of your headroom in the track and squash everything. If your guitars aren't loud enough, you won't be able to hear the notes. If the bass isn't loud enough, everything is gonna sound weak and unglued. So there's a lot of pros and cons and trade-offs, and there's usually a range of acceptable places where a mix is gonna be locked really nicely together. And the analogy I like to use is kind of like pieces in a puzzle where you take it and lock all the instruments and it sounds like a mix. You hit play, it sounds big. It sounds like everything works together. So, in that range of where the mix can really be locked, there's, all kinds of different balance things. But our goal is to kind of get into that range and focus on it. And the second important thing to realize with balance is that balance is the most important, while the least sexy thing in mixing audio. And I've judged, I would say, thousands of mixes by now from Nail the Mix that users have submitted for our monthly mix competitions. And I would say the biggest error that most people make when they're mixing is their balance is way off. For example, their shells and their drums and their cymbals are completely disconnected. And what happens is it sounds like their drums are floating in space, or the guitars are so loud that you can tell the guy mixed it is a guitar player, and so many other things. If sometimes I wonder that on material that's really well recorded, had the mixer just balanced it correctly and not done any EQ, any compression, or anything like that, what they might have found, they probably would have got a better mix than what they turned in. So it's super important to understand that while balance is not sexy or exciting or fun in any regard, it's the most important fundamental building block and the cornerstone of all mixing. So let's dig in and just take a look at what we've got here. So I've got this Machine Head song, Is There Anybody Out There? A song we mixed on Nail the Mix. And I've got some guitars and bass going to some buses here. So if we can very quickly come in and basically just adjust them as needed. So I just got some ballpark levels in here. This is nothing to it's just arbitrarily set for the sake of just hearing what's going on. And then we can have a listening. Okay, so let's say we've got the bass where we want it. Let's just pretend and eliminate that as a variable, because again, in mixing, everything affects everything. So, in order to talk about one thing in isolation, we have to just make some assumptions. So let's take the guitar here up the fader and see how it makes the song feel as we listen. Feels really disconnected down here when it's way too quiet, doesn't it? Feels like something's missing, or you can't quite hear what's going on. There's no audibility in the guitar notes. So now the guitars, I would say, are decently undermixed, and you get a lot of excitement, punch, and energy from the bass and the guitar here. For example, let me turn up the bass really loud, the bass and the drum. But it sounds kind of, like you're missing some clarity, and, we have a lot of energy and a lot of punch, but it doesn't sound big. So you can see there's a definite trade-off there. Now let's start turning the guitars up a little bit more. You'll notice as the guitars go up a little bit, they start to lock into the bass guitar and sound more like a cohesive tone. Let's keep turning them up. And for this bass volume, somewhere around, -2 to 0 dB, it really starts to gel because I've got these EQ'd pretty well with the guitar and the bass together, and they're starting to sound like one big tone. Now look, we start pushing the guitars up a little bit and it sounds really big and exciting from a guitar point of view, but you'll notice that we're losing some of the excitement of the drum. So pay attention to the kick drum and the snare drum punch as I go from -2 to +2. So you got a really big guitar sound when they're really loud like that, but you notice you're trading off power and energy into the track. When I'm around -2 with this setup here and just basic balancing, you know, we've got a lot more energy in the mix, but the guitars don't sound quite as big. So let's turn the guitars up a little bit. Now let's focus on the bass. Let's take the bass all the way down and hear what happens as we move the fader up. Guitars sound totally disconnected from the kick, snare, and cymbals. Now you can barely hear the bass in there, but it definitely sounds a lot thicker. You're getting a lot more glue, but it's perceived glue. It's not, you cannot necessarily hearing the bass. It's kind of got that Metallica and Justice for All thing. Like if you muted it, you'd know the bass wasn't there, but you know, definitely there's something. So let me mute it on and off. Now we're going to start turning up the bass and see how it affects everything. Right around -5, based off where I have the guitars in relation, you're starting to hear the bass kind of lock into the guitar and start getting thicker and start making a cohesive tone. As I turn the bass up, we're getting a lot more driving energy and the mix is starting to sound bigger. Bass is really sticking out and starting to eat up some of the headroom. Let's push it farther. And the bass is just crushing the mix. So where's the right balance? I mean, look, there's no real right balance to this. It's very subjective, but I'm going to go in and just kind of dial these in here by ear and then talk about why I chose this balance and why I thought it was good. So if I just started with the bass and not with the guitars, what I'm listening for is the area where the bass and the kick really start locking and pushing together and creating an energy coming out of the speakers. So let's listen through the range and we'll see where I end up again, just to demonstrate. That sounds pretty good to me. Let's get the guitars in here and see what's rocking. So on the chorus of the song here, I actually like the guitars a little bit quieter because I know there's going to be vocals and things like that. And I like them when they're loud, but really gelled in with the bass and the bass is really pushing. Now, if we were to fast forward to this riffs out section here after the chorus where that heavy riff comes in, I would definitely automate the guitars up there, but that's, you know, a video for another day. So this is where I think it sounds pretty good for this to my tastes. So the kick and the snare are still leading the energy of the song. The bass is pushing the thickness of the mix, and the guitars are in there sounding cohesive with the bass, like one big nice tone, rounding everything out. And you can still hear all the guitar notes. And I'm assuming that at some point there's going to be vocals in there. So if I were to come in and unmute the vocals here, let's bring them in. And let's see what happens. There's a lot of things to unmute, and then we'll hear them in relation with vocals now.
Anybody listening to me? Is anybody else scared? The paranoia dropped into my knees.
Listen what happens if I turn the guitars up.
Anybody listening to me?
Really starts like overtaking the vocal range. So that was a good decision, where maybe in a section like this where there's no vocals, it'd be better to have the guitars up 2 dB and just give it a more punching, attacking guitar riffs, you know, kind of vibe. Check it out. But in the chorus, definitely it's a little bit better in the big picture with the guitars pulled back in this song.
Anybody listening to me? Anybody else scared? The paranoia dropped into my...
The mix sounds big and thick, but it puts the spotlight on the vocals. So there you have it. There's some considerations to think about when you're balancing rhythm guitars and bass in a mix. And, you know, like I said, the most important thing to think about is trade-offs. A good place to start when you're mixing is to go up the fader and then just listen. There's what I call the zone of focus, where as we're getting louder, you're going to start focusing in and hearing different things change in the mix and how the relationship changes. And as you're learning to balance, you know, just go through that area and just see how it adjusts the feeling of the song. For example, if we get the vocals are super loud, how does that make the bass and guitars feel? You know, play off different balances, think about it, and listen carefully. Now, as you get much better mixing and have many more years of experience, this stuff is going to become instinctual, and you'll be able to balance very, very quickly and trust your decisions and know how it's going to translate through speakers to the listeners. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe to our channel for more awesome mixing videos covering a very wide range of topics. If you're interested in mixing this song, there is a link in the description here below for you to get access to this session where you can do your own mix of machine heads. Is there anybody out there? I'm Joe Wanasek, and this is Unstoppable Recording Machine.